All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. How making SharePoint intranets work, even if you hated them before. My name is Brian. I'll be helping MC today's discussion with David from Fresh Intranet. Many of you, we had a privilege of meeting at the Reagan and ALI conferences in last, last few weeks in Miami and Austin. David, I know you love these events, but with me. But how excited are you that maybe we've ended the 2025 trade show season?
It's nice to be in the same time zone for a few weeks.
I know, yeah. He has to come from Europe. I've got it pretty light. I'm coming from San Diego, so it's a little bit easier. So, but it can be grueling. But we definitely truly love it. So at these events, we get to meet, some of the best leaders who are, responsible for driving internal communications for a variety of industries, driving, mission, culture, values, which is, really critical towards helping companies grow and differentiate themselves and their, against their competitors. At these events, we typically are the only, SharePoint vendor there, which is odd to me a little bit, just because pretty much everybody in the room owns SharePoint Online, right? The reality is that, most internal comms leaders, let's just face it, I think David will agree, they don't particularly like SharePoint in a lot of ways, many of which people that we met at the conference, but they're forced to use it in a lot of organizations. There's a lot of reasons for that. But, you commonly hear the main is that, we already own it. So let's just, that's really coming from the IT group. Let's make it work, right? So a lot of that's due to security and concern from IT, along with, added costs of another, intranet solution. Another driver, has kind of popped up in the last 24 months, which is, really AI. And the desire to use, Microsoft Copilot, which requires, all your data to be in Microsoft 365. So, and to really be secured and used effectively. So, David and I, over the years, we've been involved in SharePoint since the 2000s. So I think, I will confirm that we also have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the platform at times. David has a podcast titled Fresh Perspective, which I encourage everybody to check out. One of his most recent guests was the SharePoint product director. Is that right, David?
Yes.
At Microsoft. Yeah, where he really confirmed that SharePoint's not going away. So if you're hoping it was going away, unfortunately, it's going to be here. It's been here for 25 years. It's not going anywhere. And I think the reason is that they can't really get away from it at this point. It's so integrated with everything in the Microsoft 365 tool set. It's the foundation for Microsoft's AI strategy, which, unless you just don't watch the news at all, that's projected to be a huge growth over the next few years, and it's massive. So I say that because it seems like we're constantly seeing a lot of like the standalone intranet products that are, either acquiring each other or consolidating. It's a lot of change that seems like it's happened, whereas, it leaves clients seeking a new intranet platform, requiring migration efforts, new user interface for your users, large learning curves for your admins. So during today's webinar, one goal for us is to how can we improve your opinion of SharePoint Online. But one good, feather in the cap of SharePoint is that, it's not going anywhere. So it's an investment that you can make and know that it's going to be here. So, anyhow, let's just jump into a little bit of the agenda. We're going to do some quick introductions. Then we're going to drive, David's going to get into, why does SharePoint fail to engage? Like, how can we improve the adoption of a SharePoint-based intranet? What can we do to make that better, like SharePoint better in general? And then where does AI fit in with that? And then as we're going through this, if there's any questions that you have, put them in the chat. We'll be answering those either live or at the end. And then we'll have some ways that we can stay connected. Maybe if you want to follow on deeper dive discussion, we'd love that. And then we have some resources that we'll provide and some tech skills.
Oh yes, I'm supposed to be clicking the slides. I was just so engrossed in what you were saying there, Brian.
Awkward pauses. All right, so I'm Brian, as I said, and I'm the Client Development and Success Director at Optimum. I'm also an evangelist. I've been in the digital workplace for a lot of my career, and it's just a big passion of mine. So I'm based in San Diego, born and raised, and Optimum, I focus on really like the Microsoft stack that we do. And David's the product director at Fresh Intranet. Fresh was actually developed by a company out of the United Kingdom called the Advania Group. It's a 5,000 person consultancy. And David really runs the entire division around Fresh within Advania. So, and it's got over 12 years of investment put into it. So at Optimum, really what we're trying to focus on here is really more like listening to our clients, like business needs and what they're trying to accomplish. And then where there's a technology solution that applies, we apply it, right? We don't just try to put something together to add technology or add things where it makes things obviously more complicated. So we don't really just focus on one technology platform. We have a lot of solutions that we do here at Optimum, including like SAP, Databricks, ClickUp, Smartsheets. There's a ton of them. I focus on the Microsoft stack, which involves also a lot of modern workplace development, intranet development. So I'm really focused on, here in the United States, helping customers that need a solution on SharePoint. Really, how do we customize that to meet their needs and build a unique solution that will drive adoption day one? So I'm really more on the integration side, the deployment side, developing those communication plans. So that's what we do here at Optimum. Dave, do you want to do?
Sure. So Fresh is a SharePoint intranet in a box product. As Brian said, we've been building this thing for around 12 years now. Built for SharePoint, lives in the customer's SharePoint environment, so takes advantage of all of the investments that Microsoft are putting into security, user management. All of the data stays within the customer's environment, but this provides a really feature-rich intranet experience, scoped, defined. The team, the person that is responsible for managing the intranet has got all the power of SharePoint, plus a well-defined, well-scoped, and feature-rich intranet solution that can evolve as you do. Full support for an ongoing roadmap, lots of innovation happening, particularly in the area of AI. We're going to talk about some of those things in a few slides' time. Okay, so I'm going to kick off the meat and potatoes of the session today, talking about some of the reasons that SharePoint doesn't always deliver on people's expectations when we're thinking about an intranet. Now, as Brian said, we attend a lot of events, a lot of conferences around the world, and I think probably the common theme, particularly at the internal communications events, is that people aren't huge fans of SharePoint. I interpret this that people are saying it with a lot of love, right? They're trying to improve the digital employee experience. They're listening to their IT colleagues about security and identity and retention of data and all those great things that IT people like to talk about. But SharePoint can be an unforgiving and unyielding platform to work with, particularly when we're thinking about an intranet. This is an AI-generated image of me reading this kind of mean tweet style comment that somebody made to me at an event about SharePoint. And I think this probably kind of encapsulates lots of the conversations that we have with people when they come and talk to us and I say, oh, hey, this is a SharePoint intranet product. How do you feel about SharePoint? This is kind of maybe a typical response that we get. And there's a bit of a scale here, right? On the left hand side here, we kind of have this image representing the internal comms or intranet management team. Their sort of positive view of SharePoint Intranet is that yes, IT do own the tools, but comms needs to own the experience, and employees are going to win when these two groups have a really good working relationship together. On the right-hand side, maybe the other end of the scale on the SharePoint opinion side, I pulled a muscle in my eye from rolling them so hard when IT mentioned SharePoint. And that is, genuine quote that somebody said to me at the event in kind of response to using SharePoint for their intranet. Now, humor aside on this topic, when you get into conversations with people, there are some fairly common responses that people have when you say, okay, tell me about where you're struggling. Why isn't SharePoint delivering on your expectations when you're thinking about it as an intranet? Four main reasons, categories that I would put that feedback into. The "it's too complicated" is a kind of the classic battle cry for non-technical SharePoint users. Particularly a team that are managing an intranet that maybe aren't used to using the breadth of functionality that SharePoint can provide. It is a very broad product. It can do a lot of things. It is both an app and a service. It has a lot of content, a lot of data, a lot of use cases that's going on under the hood of SharePoint. So, I completely understand that it can come across as a very complicated platform. Second one, it's owned by IT. It can feel very easy to kind of feel a bit like you're locked out of your own system and needing to rely on somebody else to help you deliver communications at a critical moment, resulting often in lots of tickets being logged to IT to get information about analytics or other data. And, it can feel like you're having to outsource a lot of the things that you prefer to be able to manage yourself. It's unmanageable, another kind of classic battle cry. Even a successful SharePoint intranet, usage of a successful SharePoint intranet brings governance challenges because it creates more content, more people, more sites, more information, more things that the intranet is doing. And, on its own is going to create more reasons for content management. As people start to explore more about SharePoint as an intranet product service, challenges around search, analytics, and governance become, reasons that it can feel a little bit unmanageable. It isn't an intranet, and this is a sentence that I wholeheartedly agree with. Out of the box, there is no big red "create my intranet" button in SharePoint, and it can feel a bit like a dumping ground for files than a digital home or a digital employee experience for people in the organization. So these are kind of four under the surface reasons as to why people struggle a bit with SharePoint. Now, when we start thinking about the kind of core reasons, what's underneath that initial feedback that people provide us with there, SharePoint is this extremely broad product. Its greatest strength and its greatest weaknesses are almost exactly the same in the breadth of things that it can deliver. You can do anything with SharePoint, and you can do anything with SharePoint really well, and you can do anything with SharePoint really badly as well. And often the experience ends up dissolving into the rest of Microsoft 365 when we're thinking about an intranet. And the average experience for employees can become a bit frustrating, a bit inconsistent, and unengaging. Now, kind of core problem is that SharePoint can be an intranet. It isn't out of the box, but it can be an intranet. It requires some assembly. It requires some expertise to be able to put it together. It can feel a bit like you're putting together IKEA flat pack furniture. You've got it home, you've got the bits out of the box, and you're then faced with the task of putting this thing together. If you've done it before a few times, you're going to end up with a cupboard that's going to look good in an IKEA showroom. Otherwise, you might end up with some of the furniture that I end up creating, where the door's a bit wobbly and maybe the shelves aren't completely aligned. The planning and governance that needs to go on inside building a SharePoint intranet is an absolute requirement. Now, underneath some of these challenges, some of the core reasons as to why the SharePoint intranet experience doesn't necessarily deliver for people is that often it is seen as being it's a free product, right? We can do it fast. We're going to work agile. But just because something is included in the license fee doesn't mean that it is ready to launch. There is often a kind of, we're going to work agile, and that can be a bit like the equivalent of, we're not going to make a plan. We're not going to consider what's happening. There can be undefined boundaries, no real agreed definition of what the intranet is or isn't. The SharePoint intranet can deliver a lot of things, as we've talked about, a lot of collaboration, knowledge management systems. It's the back end for Microsoft Teams. And all of those things can end up bleeding into the intranet, and the intranet bleeding into other things as well. SharePoint also can suffer from this challenge of a shallow start, where it's very easy to get started. It can be very easy to pilot proof of concept intranets in SharePoint. It's a much easier platform to use these days than it was a few years ago. But without that shape, the growth of this thing over time can become a little chaotic. Stakeholder misalignment, another kind of key challenge for people on SharePoint intranet projects. And often the reason that some of these SharePoint intranet projects fail isn't because of the technology. They're failing because the comms, the IT teams, other business stakeholders are trying to solve different problems with the same tool. And often that problem is never really reconciled. I think we may have lost Brian there. I'm going to skip on to the, oh, there he is.
Perfect. There we are. Yeah, I went off stage. It was like, oh, I was done. Kick him off the stage.
You're back. You're back.
They threw bananas at me or something. I was actually trying to agree with you a couple times, and then I figured out you couldn't hear me. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Like SharePoint, the thing with SharePoint, and this is where Microsoft's always going to play. They're always just going to be a platform. It's like, here's a platform. Now you go build upon that, right? And that's where a lot of these intranet products popped up 10 years ago, right? People got sick of just reinventing the wheel. Like it should just do this. It should just, so you had all these independent internet providers that were popping up, very successful ones, right? And I love their products. The problem is that long term, it's like, where does that fit into the other strategy? Because everybody's going to own Microsoft, and Microsoft in traditional fashion is going to come around. And that's kind of what's happening right now. What we have seen when we've deployed Fresh is that we're giving that intranet to a client day one, right? When we apply that Fresh onto that, and just like those other companies. So building upon what's really going on here, help people understand, why SharePoint is an important app and service. Like, why should people give it a chance, and talk about, what people can do to take back their control, almost away from IT. Not away from IT. We like IT. It's with
IT. You're going to collaborate.
Like IT, right? Yeah. They don't want control either. I've talked, I don't want this. Why am I managing the intranet? I don't even use the intranet. Why am I but they have to be involved, but because it's SharePoint. But really, how can we give the control to HR, comms, marketing, the people that actually need this internal communications tool?
It's a good question, Brian. It's almost like you've seen the slides. So
no, I have.
There are a few. Let's kind of talk a little bit about why people should give it a chance. I'm always vaguely cautious about sounding like I'm bashing SharePoint too much. It is a great product, and there are lots of reasons that people should be considering it, giving it a chance. I mentioned in the last slide that just because you've got the licensing doesn't mean that it is automatically an intranet out of the box. However, it is included in the license, so organizations have this thing. It is an extremely powerful product. People can access it already. Most organizations, I would say almost all organizations, are going to have access to SharePoint in some form or another, and likely to be using it today. It is secure. There's a billions of dollars investment that Microsoft put into security, identity, compliance with rules, regulations, laws in in a vast majority of countries across the globe. Real commitment from Microsoft to maintain these accreditations. This is a huge area of investment for Microsoft for keeping data secure. It is one of the most extensible products in the market. I would love to hear from anyone that thinks they have a more extensible platform product than Microsoft SharePoint. That extensibility comes in a number of forms as well. In the browser, editing pages, adding features, adding functionality. As I've said numerous times, it is a very easy product to use these days. Drag and drop interface. It's not a difficult platform to learn if you've never seen it before. So in the browser configuration, but also products like Fresh have been built entirely using the extensibility options that Microsoft provide third-party developers like us. So the range of extensibility is huge. It can be integrated into numerous hundreds of other platforms. Workday, ServiceNow, Confluence, there are hundreds of connectors available to bring data into SharePoint, to analyze it, to be able to respond to events that are happening in those systems. There is you're only limited by your imagination in terms of the integrations that can be built. And for organizations that are pursuing an AI strategy, who isn't these days? You've probably seen the investment that Microsoft are making into Copilot, and SharePoint is AI ready. So all of the data, the content information that's in SharePoint is being indexed by Copilot, Microsoft AI services, whether you are using them today or not. So, lots of reasons to rethink SharePoint. Now, sorry,
That
Brian.
that last point is what we hear the most these days, is IT saying, we need you to move into SharePoint at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because we're deploying Copilot. We need that functionality. We need it all to be in SharePoint. That's probably like the number one thing I've heard the last 12 months.
Yes. Yeah. The strategy for SharePoint is very much backed up these days by an organization's desire and commitment to move people into using Copilot.
Yeah.
So I've broken this next section up into 3 different slides. I was going to talk a little bit about some non-technical things that you can do. If you're in SharePoint today, you're not entirely satisfied with the experience that you're having. I wanted to give you, some of my thoughts on what are some fairly straightforward non-technical things that you can do today. There is no surprise. The majority of these are going to be applicable to any intranet project, product that's going on. SharePoint is no different from any other intranet project or solution. But these are often things that organizations have missed or not done at a sufficient level of detail. Number 1, mapping out the audience, creating some high-level groups, adding a bit of definition, and importantly, going and talking to people in those groups. This doesn't need to be a huge formal exercise. Often a 10-minute chat with someone that's representative of that audience is going to validate or explode assumptions that you might have already made. And what we're looking for there is, where can we add value with the intranet? Where is it helping? Where is it hindering? Where could more value be added? An audit of the sitemap. So if you have an existing intranet in SharePoint already, drawing out a pretty simple, logical, physical diagram of what that looks like today, and giving each of the areas a bit of a priority score. Be harsh and use any information that you gathered from the conversations and interviews to give it a relevance, quality, value score. These are going to give you some of your priorities for where to start making changes and chipping away at some of the user frustrations that you might have gathered. Making note of content owners. If people are saying to you that the policies is the most important thing on the intranet, if those policies don't have an owner in the organization, this is a gap that we're going to need to try and fill. Identifying any gaps, repeat requests that you're gathering from people, logging any missing content, any confusions, improvements that are going to make a difference to your audience. Now, what's really important with this list is that it doesn't end up being something that is undeliverable and completely overwhelming. Anchor that list in what's achievable. If you're the only person in the organization that's working on this or assigned to it, you can't rebuild an enterprise platform on your own. So, make it a reasonable and achievable list. High-level governance plan. These things are really important to have as a frame of reference for what purpose is the intranet serving, what's its scope, what's its assumptions. Importantly, what's not in scope for the intranet? What are you not responsible for that's going on inside of SharePoint? If governance plan feels like two words that are overwhelming or confusing or don't make sense, in this deck, and we will share the slides, I've added a couple of sample prompts for being able to create a governance plan with some of some kind of key inputs. So you could copy and paste those prompts into Copilot, and that is going to give you a sample governance plan that may help aid some of your conversations. Final one on this list: find your squad, find your intranet crew in the organization, track down any willing allies, share information that you've heard from users, reflect, and try and use that information to build some level of alignment. Now, on the kind of more technical-ish things that you could do that are going to be useful for you going forwards is understanding the level of control that you've got in SharePoint. What level of permissions do you have for changing the homepage, for building associations in hubs, for being able to create sites? And if you don't have the ability to make those changes, who in your organization does and could help you? One key difference that's had a great impact for lots of our customers is the ability to do personalized content targeting. And what you're going to need for that is reasonably good quality people and group data in Microsoft 365. So getting a good assessment of how good that information is really useful to you. Building some familiarity with SharePoint user interface. Again, some resources in this slide pack. We're not going to talk about them all today, but we'll make those available for people. The options for SharePoint user interface have changed recently. Flexible layouts gives you this web style edit interface. There are lots of options for fonts. It's a great component called the editorial card, which is really good for building up a nice and attractive user interface. So loads of good options in SharePoint these days. Take a step back, do an objective evaluation of your homepage. How fresh is the content? Is it a static list of links? Alignment with some of those key journeys that you've built out in the conversations with people that you spoke to.
That's another great call out, David. I think I've looked at so many intranets that say I'm not getting the adoption that I'm expecting, right? And then I look on their homepage, and the last post was from like 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And you're like, there's not a lot of reason to come here if there's not a lot of great content to read. So it is, and it's also very important to get all those different groups involved. So it's not one person, two people that are responsible for all of this content, right? And that's also a huge piece.
The response to challenges like that, like that example that you gave there, Brian, may not be that you've got to suddenly create loads of new content and make work for yourself. It may be reprioritizing what's available on the homepage. If people want policies or forms or quick links to some key sites, make that the highest priority content, because those things are going to change much more frequently than content and news pages if there's you're not necessarily producing a lot of that information.
Yeah, I've seen people the opposite, posting too much content, and the employees they can't even digest the level of content. So that is a great point. It's like it's those two extremes you want to avoid, and find that right medium where you're delivering consistent content that people can digest.
Yes. Find some balance. Okay, and then final slide in this section, I just put together 3 scenarios for next steps. So any scenarios where you've got low control, maybe you're a team of 1, you don't necessarily have all the support that you need from IT. I've given some suggested next steps for some ways that you could make improvements. So finalizing some of those maps, the site and the audience map, finding any leaders relevant in the organization that you can present some of your findings to. Really the outcome here is we're going to start to build some credibility, add some clarity and momentum, which might unlock support. So small changes, really importantly as well, AI is a great companion if you find yourself working on your own on these solutions. Whatever AI platform of choice, of using that to prototype ideas, building on suggestions, pasting in some of those feedback, getting it to challenge you. That AI can really help you if you are a team of 1 here. Scenario number 2, if you've got moderate control, you can make some changes. You've got a supportive IT partner, maybe planning a bit of a homepage refresh, make some changes to navigation, build out some of those hubs, responding to feedback that you had in those conversations with people, and maybe try and find one area where you could build a bit of a case study, create a really visible win that's going to build some buy-in for more investment, more budget, further changes. And then in a scenario where you've got, good level of control, potential for budget, an engaged IT partner, planning an intranet redesign, planning to introduce personalized content, building a regular cadence of user feedback to influence the direction that you're going to go in the future, and maybe consider partner support, product like Fresh, consultancy like Optimum, really starting to plan a move away from firefighting in SharePoint to a kind of sustainable modern intranet. So 3 scenarios that may be useful depending on where you find yourself today.
All right. Yeah, that's really good stuff, Dave. So maybe let's change the topic just a little bit, and talk about a little bit of the impact of AI. There's a lot. Microsoft's investing, seems like everything in AI at this point, right? It's like, man, Copilot, and then more Copilot. How is that? Is that going to like help the intranet, hinder the intranet? Like,
Yeah,
help us with that.
it's a good question. Again, we're back with AI me reading things that people have said to me in the not too distant past. And this has been a kind of popular statement that we've heard. AI is going to make intranets obsolete. Why bother when Copilot's going to be able to answer everything? Now, I understand where this comes from, that kind of Q&A style thing in Copilot or other AI platforms. It doesn't necessarily answer the question though, because if you've opened up Copilot or the AI product of choice and said, what's happening in the news today, as an example, or asked for a kind of specific topic of something that's going on in your organization, Copilot doesn't necessarily have the context of your intranet to be able to give you a sharp answer. It has access to, and it will have indexed everything that you have access to, whether that's public internet or corporate network. It hasn't got context of what is the organization's approved version of this answer. So the context isn't 100% there for solutions like Copilot. Now, Microsoft published a series of reports called the Work Trend Index. This is one of the most recent ones from that source. Not going to go into a lot of details today. The links are at the bottom of this slide if people are interested to read more. Really, the point for me to make here is Microsoft have invested a lot of research into this area, and really the research on what it means to be a frontier firm, so an organization leading the charge on AI, isn't just organizations that are making an investment in AI or training. It is organizations that are also making investment in making their content flexible. So sharp, low instances of oversharing, managed permissions, structured content. Ultimately, content is food for AI. And the more structured, balanced diet that it's being fed, the better the responses that people are going to get out of it. So the context of the intranet is still really useful for thinking about this. The definition of intranet is where a lot of content is going to live that people are going to want to get answers from. This is the reason that they go to intranets today. On this slide, this kind of example of this is broadly speaking how people work today. As a user, I open a web browser and I go to the intranet, in this instance, Fresh and SharePoint. I've got a homepage there and it is showing me content and information. The shift that we are expecting people to start making, and that is unlikely to be everybody, it may be both things that are going on here, is that users are opening solutions like Copilot. And inside Copilot, they're asking questions. What's happening in the news today? How do I find a policy for whether I can bring my dog to work, or what I can leave in the fridge, or some statement on health and safety, sustainability? Now, the agent in this instance, this little robot guy on the diagram here, he's got all of the context of the intranet built in. So he understands when people are asking intranet related questions, where to go to get answers and information, and also what information to push back to the employee as well. That might be related content or recent changes or announcements that are going to be useful or relevant to the question that's being asked. So we're leaning on these agents to provide the intelligence and the context of what the intranet is going to be. So it is still a useful definition to be thinking about. Now, when we're talking about agents, I want to give you a couple of examples of what we're referring to. Here's an example from Microsoft. This is the knowledge agent. Now, if you're using SharePoint, what you may have seen recently is there's a little button that's going to appear bottom right-hand side of the screen for people that have got a Copilot license. And this is where the knowledge agent is going to be accessed from. This is in preview at the moment from Microsoft. And what this is doing is bundling up a number of tasks as an agent in SharePoint. So rather than needing to write a very complex prompt in Copilot or on the screen, these are kind of bundled together statements and actions and activities so that you can go and make this thing do things for you. So it can do things like create columns in for new metadata. It can retire inactive pages. It can tell you where there are broken links in content and information and help you start to fix them. So these are agents that are performing these very specific tasks within SharePoint. We have also been building these agents inside of Fresh. So when we think about Fresh as a intranet product that lives inside of SharePoint, providing this consumer grade search experience. So similar to the experience that you're having in Google or Bing today, giving you answers to questions rather than directing you to more content. And again, curated by the person that owns the intranet. Lots of other integrations that we are also building with these agents inside of Fresh Intranet and SharePoint.
So Dave, I think what you made me just think of a little bit, I don't know why, but we started out, we have these bots, right? Like these Alexas and these different bots that are been coming out, right? And now we have agent bots, right? They're helping us find information. Next thing is you put an RO in front of that, you got robots, right? Well, yeah, so that's where we're headed, right? We're all going to have a robot. But just like at your house, like if you don't have your house organized, right? Like I have a lot of clients that, they're trying to use search. They even have Fresh and they're using the AI search from Fresh, which is like you put in a, query and then it gives you the results, right? The answer and then where it referenced. But those reference files are like not accurate in certain cases, right? They haven't gone in and cleaned up like this is not the right policy because somewhere in SharePoint it still exists. So the AI is going in there and finding the wrong answer. So they're using AI, using Copilot to find the wrong answer because the structure is not sound, right? So I guess how would you summarize what you just said a little bit
Sure.
in terms of that?
Look, I think summary for the session today, SharePoint is not without its challenges, completely accepted, but it can be a powerful intranet. We have lots of customers ranging from very small to very large multinational global corporations successfully using SharePoint as an intranet because it is worth overcoming some of those challenges for positive reasons that we already talked about. It's secure, integrated, extensible, AI ready. Optimizing for intranet, though, needs some work, right? Similar work that we're going to perform with other intranet solutions and products, but maybe specific to how these things are going to need to work inside of SharePoint. Partners like Fresh, like Optimum are going to be able to add a lot of value here because experience, expertise, a lot of the thinking, a lot of the building of some of these additional components to solve problems with search or analytics, the thinking has already been done in there. Copilot, other AI can offer you as a internal communicator, an intranet manager, a willing partner that's going to be able to help you develop and enhance your plans. And I think on this last section here, the future of intranets is secure. Humans are visual people. We like to look at things and interact with systems in a visual manner. I think the kind of text-based prompting and agents offers new ways of getting answers and getting stuff done, but still wrapped up in this context of intranet. Yeah.
I'll add in. Here's a slide on how we can further connect. But this obviously from what you haven't seen, and some of you have maybe seen a little bit of the Fresh Intranet solution layered on top of SharePoint at the conferences. But in general, it takes a lot of effort to get to the point where you start day one with a fresh layer on there, right? It's like you could spend. I mean, we just Advania spent 12 years developing this solution. So in summary, my point of view is I talk to customers all day long. It's like we could build all this as a consultancy. We can build everything for you from scratch. We could. SharePoint's got the platform to do it, right? We can build all this. But is that in your best interest, right? Is that financially the right decision to make when we can just get something that provides the functionality that you need? the reality is some people don't need all that functionality, right? Some clients don't need that. They're fine with the basics. So it kind of depends on where you're at with your intranet in SharePoint. Maybe you're considering a migration to SharePoint online. We'd love to talk to you. So that QR code is a link to my calendar. You can book a time with me. I'll rope in David and whoever from our side to talk with you a little bit about what you're doing. See what is a potential solution that we can put together that might help you, and kind of go from there. And then there's some resources here that Fresh has got a ton of resources. Some helpful stuff about how you can really bring SharePoint come to life. And then this thing, this might be if you have Copilot, this might be a golden prompt here to get your governance plan, and you can copy and paste that. I think we're going to provide the slide deck afterwards, so you'll have that.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, so you can just literally copy and paste this. You don't have to start typing or writing this down. We'll send it to you, and then maybe this is an example prompt that you can use that would give you a governance plan for SharePoint.
Okay, I think we are at time there, Brian.
Excellent. Well, we just want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. We'd love to meet you in person if we met you in person at the different conferences over the year. I hope everybody has a great holiday here.
Cheers.